Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on our series, the Sustainable Development Goals. My name is Shana Shamim. That is my preferred name, and happy to have you here. So Inclusive Talk is a feminist discourse invented to educate, inform, and promote disability voices in current affairs. This is hosted by three young women with disabilities who are Asha Namatofu, Maureen Kalunji, and myself. I will give a moment to Maureen and Asha to introduce themselves and speak about their professional bios. Maureen, happy to see that Asha has joined us.
Good evening to our listeners. Good morning to international people. My name is Maureen Kalunji, disability inclusion expert. I'm happy to be with you on this inclusive talk as we dive so much into sustainable development goal number 1. And I'm happy to be on the same platform with our council, Florence Ndagire. You're most welcome. And I'm so glad to be here to listen to you as you give us amazing talk. Thank you.
Asha?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Asha Namato. I'm a disability employment activist. I also run an organization called Nafet Savara Foundation, an organization that advocates for and on behalf of little people, adults with an average height of an average 6 years old, of average height.
Thank you so much, Asha. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Asha. Oh, yeah. And Shana Shamim, I am a gender and disability rights expert. So before we go into Sustainable Development Goal 1, previously we held a beta for Sustainable Development Goal 8, Decent Work and Economic Growth for All, with expertise from Ms. Deborah Iyute, an inclusive employment advocate, and Mr. Nelson Bugembe, an entrepreneur and founder of Twezule Foundation. So this tweet chat was in honor of Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and because one of our experts is deaf also. This was covered by Nafet Sobola Foundation at Nafet Sobola, so please make sure to follow to catch up on the knowledge shared by both Miss Deborah and Mr. Nelson Bugembe. It was really insightful and very educative. So on to Sustainable Development Goal 1. I'll give a chance to our speaker to introduce herself. Florence, please introduce yourself to our listeners. Oh, she dropped off. Let me try to find her. I have texted Florence, so we're waiting for feedback from her. But in any case, we can dive into Sustainable Development Goal while we wait for her. So we are really in the last leg of the series on Sustainable Development Goals. And toward us off is Sustainable Development Goal 1, no poverty. It's one of the topmost goals where Sustainable Development Goals are concerned. Florence is finally here where Sustainable Development Goals are concerned. However, Florence, please answer your request to speak. Okay, so I've sent Florence a request to speak. I hope she responds to it. To get back to the topic, Sustainable Development Goal 1, no poverty, is one of the topmost goals where Sustainable Development Goals are concerned. This goal has the face of a woman and also the state of disability because we often read that it is feminized. And we also know, those of us who work in disability, that disability and poverty cannot be divorced. So this is why it's quite important because of the inequalities that it has escalated. It has escalated because of the gender aspect and also the disability aspect. Furthermore, people in low to middle income countries are entrenched in abject poverty despite the variety of poverty alleviation and economic empowerment programs. So tonight we do have Miss Florence Ndagire, a PhD finalist and a lawyer, to share with us her knowledge of Sustainable Development Goal 1, challenges and recommendations for inclusive sustainable development. And she is online, just having trouble, I think, to speak. Oh yeah, Florence, you can finally speak now.
Yeah, I beg your pardon. I must have missed out some information.
Oh no, I was just
Did
giving
you ask any
background
question?
to Sustainable Development Goal 1.
Yeah.
And then I had requested you to introduce yourself to our listeners, and then we can dive in.
Okay. Thank you very much for hosting me today on Hex. My name's Florence Ndagire. I am a final PhD student. I'm a lawyer and I have lived experience of disability because I am blind. I'm going to speak to you from an expert point of view of understanding poverty and disability in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florence. So I'll request Asha and Maureen to take over.
Council Florence, even I love the way you speak. To go on, Council, if I'm to ask, please elaborate on the saying poverty and disability cannot be divorced in regard to poverty eradication measures. Council, over to you.
Maureen, as the saying goes, poverty and disability cannot be divorced. It's indeed true. Only 6% of the world's minority own the wealth and are the richest, while the 15% persons with disabilities all over the world, most of them live in abject poverty just because they're unemployed and most of them are least educated. For Uganda's case in particular, many people with disabilities are the poorest of the poor. And why disability cannot be divorced with poverty is because disability has cost-related needs that are not funded because Uganda is not a welfare state. So the lack of inclusive social protection policies that are in line with the needs of persons with disabilities, the lack of a welfare system that grants benefits to the unemployed and uneducated, and the lack of a needs-based approach to support disability-related needs, including personal assistance, leaves persons with disability in abject poverty. Actually, most people who support people with disabilities remain unemployed because they are doing that care work that is not paid. And persons with disabilities are severely affected by poverty because even the investments do not support them to acquire financial loans. That's why disability cannot be divorced with poverty. Hi, Maureen.
Hi. Oh, thank you so much, Council Florence. It's so wonderful that you have said so that most of the times it's because we are uneducated. Most of the persons we get with disabilities are uneducated, and also even the caregivers lack what to, like, their work is not paid for. So, Council, I would love also to know how can we address the systematic barriers and exclusion. Council.
Yeah, I beg you. Yes, go on.
I wanted to know more. How can we address the systematic barriers and biases that perpetuates poverty and exclusion among persons with disabilities? I don't know whether you got me well.
Yes, I got you. Okay. First of all, there are strategies that are geared towards poverty eradication. But in the design of those strategies and programs and projects, persons with disabilities must be part of the design process, the implementation process, the planning, monitoring, budgeting, and evaluation. If they miss out, then their needs will not be identified, then disability will not be budgeted for as a cross-cutting issue in poverty eradication, and then still the barriers will not be addressed. So, first of all, persons with disabilities must be consulted at their individual level and organizational level to discuss the kind of barriers they experience in finding investments for poverty, for example, in microfinancing, in finding challenges, in identifying challenges they face, in getting loans, acquiring loans for their businesses, in identifying their failure to participate in programs and projects like Bonaba Gagawale, community-driven fund, and Emioga or the parish development model. So if we find out what the barriers are from their lived experience point of view, and consult them in light of what they think would work, then we'll have addressed the barriers. Persons with disabilities understand their own needs and they are experts in alleviating poverty that affects them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Florence. I don't know whether my co-host Asha, you have a question for our council?
Good evening, everyone. Once again, good evening, Florence. Welcome to Inclusive Talk. We are happy to have you today. My question is about the government-aided programs. What are some of the government-aided programs in place to eradicate poverty? And if you would, if you could concentrate on those that are including persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asha. Good evening to you, and thank you for hosting me. Some of the government-aided programs that are geared towards poverty eradication that involve persons with disabilities are the parish development model that guarantees a 10% disability inclusion. We also have the special grants that provides persons with disabilities with some assistance to come out of poverty. Emioga never mentioned disabilities, so I don't know. I believe the rest really are not disability based, but there is also the women empowerment program. There was a community driven development fund. But I am pretty sure that the special grant and the parish development model are inclusive of persons with disabilities. The challenge is that with some of the programs, they cannot benefit persons with disabilities who are not in business, who cannot borrow and return the money they have borrowed. There are those that don't work completely and are severely disabled. So such programs cannot benefit them. We need to realign ourselves, and government needs to realign its programs to particularly support people with disabilities. First, by reskilling them, raise awareness in terms of how to borrow and repay. Then maybe their strategic programs would work. Otherwise, aside from those programs, if we are to reduce poverty, we need to find, for example, career development centers that will guide people into employment, convince employers to employ people with disabilities by deconstructing the stigma that regard them as non-performers, and find social benefits for those who just come into employment or who are not employed at all, because then maybe we can eradicate poverty. But in the absence of all those support programs, then I'm not sure if the Sustainable Development Goal on ending poverty will be met. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Florence, for that. I wanted to request that you highlight if there are other examples in other countries where such programs of social protection have been successful in alleviating poverty when it comes to persons with disabilities. and if you can benchmark on such programs. Thank you.
There are countries with very good social protection systems. For example, in the UK, in Ireland, in Netherlands, and Germany. First of all, they have welfare systems that support people who are unemployed. That's one. They have designated disability allowance to meet disability-related costs. For example, if you don't have a wheelchair, if you don't have crutches, people who don't have artificial limbs, those who need eye care, glasses, which here in Uganda is not almost there. We have an orthopedic workshop, but sometimes most of the wheelchairs and crutches are sold. So we need such a system in place to understand that people with disability comes with its related costs that cannot be otherwise covered by those who are poor. That's one. They have like what I mentioned, career development centers that support people, especially fresh graduates who just come into employment. Organizations are also willing to take them up as interns and volunteers. And the rate of discrimination is not as high as here in Uganda, where people do not believe in us. They also have sheltered workshops for those that cannot handle clerical work or white-collar jobs. And you find that their system is all round, supports everyone, whether highly educated or not. Secondly, if one is not in employment, they believe that someone must continue to survive, so they provide disability-related benefit for those who cannot be in employment, which is a plus. And they have designated rules or laws that allow people to get loans in the bank. Of course, that's part of legal capacity that persons with disabilities possess. But I've seen it here in Uganda where a person with disability goes to the bank to get a loan, and just because they have a disability, the bank doesn't believe that they have the capacity to repay. And then secondly, those countries have really done a lot of investments to eradicate poverty. But you find that here, even our budget is not inclusive. Nobody is willing to reinvest in disability-related initiatives that can eradicate poverty. So there are lots of good practices to learn from, and if we try and benchmark from developed countries, Uganda will get higher.
Thank you, Flo. With as many programs in place, the biggest percentage of the population still is below the poverty line of $2 per day. What are we doing wrong where these programs are concerned? Because you mentioned previously that most of the government programs are either geared towards persons without disabilities generally, excluding that inadvertently or deliberately. That is up for discussion. So where are we going wrong? How can we change this? Yes.
Where are we going wrong? We have not been deliberate in targeting people with disabilities. That's one. Persons with disabilities have not been consulted in terms of what they can do, how they can do better to come out of poverty. And nobody follows up. For example, there is no accountability done to ensure that persons with disabilities are brought on board. The country has not been bold to promote disability inclusion in poverty eradication programs. Some of the best strategies to do is to find success stories or role models of people with disabilities who are wealthy, to tell the government how they have managed to bring on board strategies. Persons with disabilities can be consulted to design their own strategies that they think can better benefit them to bring or to innovate their own initiatives. Where are we going wrong? The budgets themselves are not inclusive. We have health-related issues as people with disabilities that take up most of our finances, and we are not insured. Let them provide health insurance, disability allowance, and they will see whether people with disabilities will still languish below the poverty line. Hi, Asha. Are you here?
I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Flo. Perhaps Shabib, you can take it up.
Hi, yeah. Oh wow. I am very impressed by the wealth of knowledge here on what we can do, especially the benchmarking. To what do they say? Traveling is exposure itself, right? So I didn't know like all these protection measures do exist abroad, and at least Uganda could benchmark. So I'm allowing Maureen to speak, but Florence, let me ask you, how can we? Oh, sorry, that is what. Yeah, how can we ensure that poverty reduction initiatives and social protection programs in Uganda are inclusive and accessible to persons with disabilities who are often among the most marginalized and excluded?
First of all, we have a social protection policy in place of 2015. It's long overdue and it needs review. We need to review this policy in line with disability inclusive initiatives to make sure that persons with disabilities are brought on board. When this strategy is reviewed, when this policy is reviewed, it will lay down strategies for promoting inclusive poverty initiatives. It will lay down the gaps that have particularly excluded persons with disabilities, and to bring on board solutions. If not, if it cannot be reviewed, we need to reinvent a social protection policy for persons with disabilities, designed by persons with disabilities themselves because of their lived experience. That's one. And this should be followed by a plan of action that is fully budgeted or fully financed and funded, and also a system-wide, for example, a systematic way of providing for the needs of persons with disabilities, taking Uganda into a welfare state. We are many. We are a significant population that votes for this country. Why can't they even find that budget to ensure that our needs are provided for as of right without us begging? Let them give us health insurance. Let them give us food if we can't afford it. We should be given housing. That's really social protection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florence. Okay, we do have a listener. She had a question, but I think she has dropped off, so I cannot see her. Maureen, please. Okay. So sorry. Let me get back to this. So maybe this isn't in the flow, but I read it somewhere that these poverty alleviation programs and social protection programs, they do what? They escalate gender inequalities, or rather they enforce the gender stereotypes, Florence. Like, I think it's the demarcation saying that this is Uganda Women's Empowerment Program, and now this is the National Special Grant for Persons with Disabilities. How can we go about removing the enforced gender stereotypes from these programs?
One way is to raise awareness, to deconstruct the stereotypes, associated with these programs. The reasons as to why these programs are specially are designed for particular categories of people is because they want to remedy the past imbalances that have existed. Persons with disabilities have been marginalized for a long time, sidelined and excluded from all existing programs. The same has been to women who have fought to gain equality. So normally, it's men who bring about issues of inequalities and enforcing stereotypes. But we need to strengthen our relations and continue to empower women and persons with disabilities to advocate and fight for equalization of opportunities. The reasons are really very clear. There has been a lot of imbalance in history that has marginalized women and persons with disabilities. And of course, with the coming into force of the principles of leave no one behind by the Sustainable Development Goals and the motto of nothing for us without us, we shall continue to reinforce and deconstruct the stereotypes associated with being a female and a person with a disability, and continue to rise above all heights to become rich and wealthy, to reduce poverty at all ages, and to sensitize those in power to accord us the investments we desire. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Florence. Having said that, would you share with us how can we ensure that poverty eradication initiatives and social protection programs in Uganda are inclusive and accessible to persons with disabilities who are often among the most I'm saying, how can
So one way is through representation on all the poverty eradication commissions and programs. Have a person with disabilities who will always raise our issues during the design and implementation of programs. So we must be part and parcel of the design. We must be part and parcel of the discussions around poverty eradication initiatives. We must be part and parcel of people who monitor and evaluate the implementation of such programs. We must bring on board data for persons with disabilities who have been left out in poverty eradication programs. We should question the implementers to account as to why we have been left behind. And above all, we should advocate for a disability inclusive social protection policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Flo, for that. I wanted to ask something which is more related to you in your field as a lawyer. Target 1.4 of SDG 1 aims to ensure that all men and women have equal rights to ownership and control of land and other forms of property. But we know that in African settings and in our own settings as Ugandans, persons with disabilities are not allowed to own land or to even inherit property. What can you tell us about that in regards, what protections are there for women, especially with disabilities, or for persons with disabilities, those with psychosocial or intellectual disabilities, in protecting them when it comes to this? How does one either inherit or secure land or something like that? And where would someone, if they had trouble, where would they go to seek redress or remedy?
Okay. I will talk through two lenses. One will be our Constitution of Uganda, which is the supreme law, and the other will be the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The Constitution of Uganda provides for the right to own property and prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability under Article 21. Guarantees equality of all regardless of disability. It further goes on to say that any cultures and customs that are inconsistent with the Constitution must be null and void to the extent of its consistency. So if our traditions do not allow us to own land and to own any property, then they are inconsistent with the Constitution. And then it means, and the committee has observed, Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has observed that a Succession Act must be amended to allow women and girls with disabilities to own property, which now you must advocate for to make sure that we have a law in place to guarantee that protection. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is one binding international instrument that binds Uganda by virtue of customary international law. Under Article 12, it guarantees the right to legal capacity, including the right to own property and control property. And property includes land, finances, among others. A person with a disability has an opportunity to own land in terms of contracting land, buying it, or selling it. So one lasting thing we haven't found, perhaps, are cases brought to court by persons with disabilities, because we have a court of law where we can get remedy for violation of the right to ownership. We have the land board everywhere, at the district land board, where we can go to seek redress if we think our land has been evaded. And we also have the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which has a complaint procedure through which you can raise a complaint and the state party can be put to answer as to why they're discriminating you and not letting you own property. So those are some of the strategies that we can have as a remedy, but this must be taken on after domestic remedies have been exhausted. When you go to the magistrate court and report a land case, and you go to you don't get a redress, you go to the High Court. If you don't get a redress there, then you go to the Court of Appeal. If you exhaust that, and then you go to the Supreme Court. Once the Supreme Court also hasn't helped you, then you go to the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. They will make a decision on that case, and it will be an international case. For the first time of a person with disabilities in Uganda reporting a case against ownership of property in line with Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And general comment number 1. Thank you.
Flo, I wanted to come back to you around this same issue. Mm-hmm. When you talk about the options that are out there, the legal remedies, they are still onerous and also expensive, meaning that someone with a disability or woman with a disability in the most remote areas of this country might not be able to seek justice for herself or for themselves. Are there organizations that are dealing particularly with this, either within the CSOs or within the DPOs, that are actively working on this issue, where if one of our listeners out there and has this problem, that they can run to other people doing like pro bono work around this area to support?
Makerere University School of Law has a legal aid clinic and provides legal aid to any member who feels they have been aggrieved. The National Union of Women, the NUDIPU also has a project of that kind, and they provide legal assistance to people with disabilities who have been offended. There is also another organization called LAPID, Legal Action for Persons with Disabilities, and it provides assistance to people who have been aggrieved. So we will go to those people and find out. But despite the fact that the legal procedures are very expensive, there are also alternative mechanisms through which we can seek for justice. There are, land starts at the AOC courts. We have the local council courts, and our chairpersons at the village level almost know where each land has been demarcated. They know all the demarcations. So one alternative would be to negotiate and discuss among neighbors in terms of maybe the human rights violation or the denial of ownership to land has been violated, and find mechanisms. There would be also some dispute mechanisms, dispute resolution mechanisms, such as arbitration, which sometimes can help. Yeah, that's really it. Thank you.
Thank you, Florence. Shannon, do you want to go, or Maureen, with one of almost our last questions? Maureen, do you want to take it up, or I can continue?
Yeah, I'm on. Having said to Council Florence, I wanted to know, having said all the organizations that are there that can help us, what do you think, what role can can this organization do in shaping policies and programs aimed at achieving Sustainable Development Goal number 1 in Uganda? And even other civil societies that are not DPO related.
You know that the Sustainable Development Goals is reviewed through a forum called the High Level Political Forum, and states volunteer to be reviewed. So when a state party writes a report, the one way you can participate is by writing a rejoinder to speak against the challenges that you have been facing in implementing the SDGs, especially on poverty. So that secondly would be to try and write position papers on the existing in the policy framework. And thirdly, it would be to reinvent, for example, in our own organization that people can learn from. It can be a pilot program.
Florence, we've lost you there. Your network, I think, is giving us trouble.
So where did I stop?
If it's okay with you, can you go back right to the top?
Okay, I'll go back a bit. Okay, I'll go back a bit. So we could be a part of the speak to speak about the challenges we have experienced in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, especially the goal on ending poverty. So we need to take ourselves out there and tell them that we know this is the truth and this is what we know. That's one. Participate in developing the rejoinders, especially when state parties or when the Ugandan state accepts to be reviewed and submits a report. You read through that report, convert yourself as a consortium or as a forum and write a rejoinder against those initiatives that the government thinks they could have implemented. You will then help the high-level political forum to develop recommendations to make sure that changes are made. And then, as organizations or individuals, you could write position papers identifying the gaps in the targets that have excluded persons with disabilities and propose recommendations for inclusion. Then you could develop programs. For example, they could be called model programs on eradicating poverty as an organization and maybe seek for funding. And you could use those programs to raise awareness, to convince government and to dialogue with them to make sure that they put you in those small spaces where they make decisions, to dialogue with them to ensure that persons with disabilities remain part of the poverty eradication strategies and that they are mainstreamed across all programs of poverty eradication. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florence. I personally am very impressed, and I feel like this is a lot of information for me to take in. I like the fact that there's the option of writing a position paper if we do it as a consortium. Yeah, that's a really good idea. And I know that very soon there's an SDG conference. There's an SDG conference very soon, I think in July. That would have been a good idea to actually take upon as a consortium. But I also like the idea of developing model programs. I think, if I recall, Nudipu had one of these programs on the Sustainable Development Goals. They formed several caucuses. They have a livelihood caucus. They had an accessibility caucus, and I think one on. I know those two because I remember participating in some of them, and they were quite effective.
Yeah.
But I think maybe lobbying for funding is a problem, because this is a very good idea and it could actually stand on its own. I mean, like the caucuses could actually stand on their own because of the work that they did. So these are very good ideas, Florence. Thank you so much. I feel like I've taken a lot of knowledge on this. Go on.
For your information, there is also another conference in June 27th, organized by the Dutchess Working Group in The Hague, in the Netherlands. It's an upcoming workshop. I don't know if I could share. And it's talking about SDG. I think SDG 1 or SDG 2, something like that. But I do, you don't pay for it, so maybe what you would need to pay would be your ticket and stuff. But it's one thing that maybe would be beneficial if we participated, because you can participate at an individual level or at an organizational level. And there is a priority on disability inclusion, which I believe very few people will want to participate in. So
that is true.
The more we put ourselves there, is the more we shall achieve our objectives.
Yes, it's a good idea. Please share. So we do have one of our listeners. I don't know if would like to ask a question. Or Asha and Maureen, do you have anything else to add?
On my end, I don't really have much to add. I maybe want to extend my thanks to Florence for taking us through SDG 1. There is a lot of knowledge that we've gotten out of this, and for people on the call, and lots of action points for ourselves as individuals, but also those of us working with disability, but also on probably on the government level. I hope these our recordings get to the right people. I wanted to just maybe also highlight some simple actions that we could take up as individuals, because for most cases we leave these things to the government, and the government is not caring about us from now on. So I thought as individuals we could support organizations that are helping people to come out of poverty, advocate for policies that address poverty and inequality, gender inequality too, and then volunteer your time for one of our listeners there. Help those in need. You could, the concept of Ubuntu, where in the community you help your neighbor, you help that other person within your neighborhood who is not doing well, if you can support them in some way, or organizations have programs that will support such people. Or you could also individually donate to causes that align with eradicating poverty. Yeah, so I believe that every action counts, and together we can make a big difference. Thank you everyone for listening, and thank you to our special guests.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
Thank you so much, Asha. Maureen?
Thank you so much to our listeners. Thank you so much to our host, our speaker, Council Florence. I like the way you were presenting yourself, the way you were addressing these things, because you're on point. And the most thing that hit me was like the one that I liked most is like we need to write position papers as a consortium so that we can we see how we can address this SDG one as a whole, not like in a silo. And also, I would love to say that thank you to. My hope is that at least our voices can reach to the people that are concerned on making these policies, making social protection guides to see that we eradicate poverty among persons with disability, especially the women and the rural people. Thank you so much for your time. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much, Florence, for your time and for your knowledge. It has been very educational. I've liked it. So much to learn from you as always. And we definitely have so many takeaways from this Sustainable Development Goals series, which at the end of it all, we shall put into like a blog post or an article. I've been working on that. So we do have where to start and what to include from all the knowledge you have shared and also the other speakers. I'd like to wish all of us a very good weekend and a good week ahead. Good night.